Hey everyone, I'm Victor Dwyer, and today this is the Mind Workshop podcast, where we chat with experts in the industry and just talk about how to be happy and take those negative thoughts outside yourself. Today we have Ben with us, and he's going to give us a little intro about himself, and then we're going to dive right into what it really takes to be happy these days. Ben, thank you so much for joining today.
Victor, man, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to jump on here with you. Thanks for reaching out. I'm so pumped to talk about happiness, mindfulness, all the things that I've been following you on. I feel like likewise. A little about myself. I'm a mental health coach. So what that means is I bring on clients. I do group coaching. I work with school districts. I work with hospitals and a bunch of other type of service industries to help employees with their mental health, whether that be working through relationships, working through what we're talking about, finding happiness in their everyday life, and just the wide range of things that you can work through, whether it be anxiety, whether it be depression, whether it be, other mental health type obstacles to work through. That's what I help you through. I help build those bridges for getting into the right types of help. And then just providing a safe space for people to feel comfortable, to be their vulnerable self, to get on the path to a happier life.
Yeah, and that's amazing. And I feel like so many of us are constantly have this mask on, especially with the current age of how males are right now, where you got to be tough. You can't cry. Like you got to be big and things like that. And I made a post about how the guys that act the most macho are actually the ones that are hurting the most inside, that are the weakest, that are the most vulnerable, or that are the most scared about being vulnerable. And the post, like, people were like, "You're stupid. You don't know what you're talking about." I'm like this is literally what I'm talking about. Like, literally, when you're vulnerable, that indicates that you're strong. That indicates that you can be weak and things like that. But the guys that are all macho and acting like they're all strong and all that bull crap, those are actually the weakest people, because those are the ones that have to put on that mask and not show their vulnerable side because they're scared of what people may think of them. So it's really, really fascinating.
It is. So, and I think of it that way too, is we all reach, whether we call it a healing journey, a personal journey, self-development journey, whatever people want to call it, right?
Hmm.
We all get to different stages at different times. And sometimes we are wearing a mask when we don't know we're wearing a mask because we've been taught from such a young age that we have to think a certain way, act a certain way, talk
Hmm.
a certain way, and all of those things. And so what I've learned is when those people are saying those types of things, I don't look at it like you're wrong or wow, how could you feel that way to me? I'm like, wow, you haven't gotten to that point yet where you've like had to dig real deep and like whether you want to call them demons, I don't know what people want to call them, but you
Yeah.
haven't like sat with them on the couch and had the conversation with like, what are we doing and how are we working through this together? Because like you said, it's a projection of people's past, people's environments, what they've been exposed to, whether it be childhood trauma or anything like that. You're seeing it all usually in one keyboard warrior that is typing at you, telling you that, like you said, you're stupid or something like that.
Yeah. And what would you say the starting stages, like, let's say there's a person that's extremely macho out there that acts like they're the
Mhm.
strongest. What would you say to that person, or what would you say to that person to get them in the starting stages of healing, and rather than putting on that mask of, like, saying that, yeah, basically to stop doing that mask of saying I'm always the best. How would you start that starting stage?
I would ask myself, or if I'm their coach, I would ask, what are you being macho for? What are
Hmm.
you protecting yourself from? Because I'll be honest, like there's times people just aren't ready to work through that yet. People
Yep.
are comfortable with that mask on, with the big muscles, going to the gym, being that type of way, and that's totally okay. As you know, somebody else, I'm like, I don't choose to surround myself with those people, which is fine too. But that's the one question I would ask is something happened in your life which made you feel like you have to be bigger, better, buffer than everyone out there. So it's like that famous question, like, who hurt you? But like
Hmm.
in a really like what happened in your life to make you feel like you have to put on this shield of armor or this cape to stop yourself from feeling these things that once made you feel way too vulnerable and exposed.
Yeah. And it reminds me of the scenario when, like, I used to think that my body was never enough. Like, no matter how skinny I got or how fit I got, I would always have this internal voice that would always say, "You're fat, you're fat, you're fat," no matter how skinny I got. And then I eventually asked myself, why? Like, why is my body not good enough? And then I realized that I was actually not comfortable with who I am as a person, that I was actually ashamed of who I was. And then I had to tackle that saying, hey, I do love myself. I've been able to progress. Like I'm able to do that. And loving myself was the thing I was running away from. And so once I was able to ask why, then that completely changed my life. But I would have ended up going through my entire life working out and running away from the insecurity if I didn't confront that. So you have to ask why. You have to ask why. People go through their entire lives without asking why once, and it's crazy. It really
I s- I say that's the most powerful question anybody can ever ask in any scenario. And sometimes you're taught in school like stop asking so many questions. Like this like I used to think like I couldn't stand science class for the longest time because the answer always was this is just the way it is. And I was like, but it's not. It wasn't that way until the other way was proven by this. Like
yeah,
it makes sense. So I think, like pat yourself on the back there because asking yourself why, which I'm sure opened up a whole different world for you, which is really painful, really hard at first because you're starting to meet a new person and
yeah.
that person's vulnerable. That person's not wearing that mask. That person's not hiding behind that comfort of saying, this is just the way I'm going to be. Like,
Hmm.
yeah, no, I'm going to eat a certain diet. I'm going to work out a certain amount of hours and weeks or days in a week. Like, you took that mask off, and like, that's the hard work. Like, the
Yeah.
hours in the gym is one thing, but taking off those layers and getting to know the real reasons of why you are and feel the way you do, man, that's a whole different type of strength.
Yeah, and I know when something's wrong when I tell myself that this is just the way I am. Then as soon as I say those words, I'm like, wait a second, like something's wrong here. Then I ask, okay, why is it the way I am? Because then if, like, for example, I used to always be addicted to progressing, and then I asked, like, it's just the way I am. And I was like, wait a second, let's stop here. Why am I so addicted to progressing? It's like, oh, it's because I think my current self is not good enough, that I have to chase that perfect version of myself to feel validated because I'm not comfortable with who I am. Then I realized, it wasn't the way I am. I was just running away from that insecurity. So if you find yourself telling yourself it's just the way I am, like, look at it and ask yourself why, because most likely it's not. We very little of the time will actually be the way you are. Like
It's
I
so
would say
true.
0.001% of the time will actually be the way you are.
And as you work through it too, because it gets, I don't know if you've bumped into this on your journey. Sometimes then you get into this like healing vortex where you never, like what you're saying is like, I never feel like enough. And then you can start feeling like I'm never fully healed. And like to that, I'd say to people, like, don't replace one grind with another grind and call it healing
Yeah,
because you have to take breaks along the way and to like almost implement the things you've learned about yourself. You have to like sit with, and that's why I talk about therapy, counseling, coaching. Like, you have to have a space to understand the progress you're going at, because if you never sit there and realize the progress you made, you're just doing the same exact thing that
yeah.
got you in here, but you're just replacing one topping on the pizza with another essentially.
100%. And you have to ask, like, instead of doing the journey, you got to ask, like, why behind those things. And I do want to address this question right here from Ron. Really amazing question. Basically, it says, often it is related to PTSD from some type of event in their life. First thing is to identify that event, then asking the question, what happened in your life, that can close the door, creating a negative response. Asking the question, which will cause a positive reaction. In another word, in another word, it takes more than one question to affect someone's life, and that's 100% true. And like most of us don't even know why we are the way we are. So for example, as a guy, like as a guy grows up, we learn that saying, like, crying, big boys don't cry, like someone told us that. And then we learned, oh, crying is a shameful act, we shouldn't cry, we shouldn't feel sad. And we applied shame to that emotion, but we don't remember that. Like, it was like such a long time ago. Most of it's like so repressed that we don't even remember. But it affects us in our adult life all the time, where it's like, hey, as a guy, you're not supposed to cry, what are you doing, you're not a man. And like you and if you do that, you shame, and you never end up feeling the emotion of sadness. And when you are feeling sad, you feel shame because you said, oh, I'm sad, so I must be shameful for I'm not a man of who I am. And that's not true. You have to justify your emotions. And for me, the phrase saying it's okay to be sad, it's okay to feel pain, like unleashed like a whole layer of good feelings for me. So I now justify my emotions and say it's okay to feel those certain emotions now.
Oh, and spot on. And I just want to touch on what Ron said too, and as it relates to exactly what you're saying, is you're looking for that positive momentum, right? So
Yeah.
by asking yourself why, and another way I phrase this, either with myself or with clients, is saying, what am I learning from this? So what that does is stops you directly in the track of going down that vortex, right? PTSD is a completely different beast than a lot of other stuff, right? Like it's not just anxiety, that's trauma stricken stuff that is going to bring up feelings, emotions, memories, and even hallucinations. And like it's going to bring you back, right? So when you sit there and you ask yourself, what am I learning from this? What you're doing is you're stopping the vortex and you're starting to look for the positive instantly. So you're starting to look in the good in the situation. Like, I can't change the trauma that happened as much as I probably wish I could have. But what I can do now is from this moment forward, learn from this and start creating something different. And what you're talking about is unbelievable because what you're saying is I'm a human being. Like I'm built to feel emotions. I've been conditioned not to. I've been taught not to feel emotions, but every human on this earth that walks, that has laid before us, has felt all the ranges of emotions, whether they showed you or not. So when we learn that we can sit with those, process them, and learn from them, we're just being human. Like we're
Yep.
just being what we are designed to be.
That's so true. And what would you say? What is some other actionable advice that you would give to someone to kind of get that awareness that these thoughts, most of us are in the default reality, meaning that we think our thoughts are exactly the words that we say in our head are exactly what it is, no doubt about it, and we don't think that we can ever change these thoughts because it's our brain. But in reality, are like these things are can be changed over time and things like that. What would you say to someone to get out of that default mode in the brain to really start realizing these thoughts are not theirs?
It's how you're talking to yourself. It's that right there, which is the box you're putting yourself in. I promise you, for a month, you start telling yourself that different like the things you want to do are possible, that you are good enough, that you're loved the way that you are, and you start reinforcing that. Because what, it takes 14 days to break a habit and 30 days to create a routine out of it, or whatever those numbers or phrases might be.
Uh-huh.
But it goes with self positive talk. The way you've talked to yourself, you were taught to talk to yourself that way. So if you can change, and like that's the actionable way, is even when, you know, when people call themselves idiots or people call themselves dumb, not good enough, like whether you're joking or not, you have this thing called your subconscious mind that is always listening. And unlike the conscious brain, it doesn't pick up on sarcasm. It just it all it hears is I'm dumb, and it goes, "Okay, I'm going to create a world in which you feel dumb." And then
Yeah.
you sit there and like and you keep reinforcing it. You keep saying it. You keep saying it. So start talking to yourself literally like you see the best version of you. Talk to you as you are the best version of yourself, because the best version of you doesn't shit on you. You know what I mean? Like,
That's true. It's very true. And I always talk about how the content that you listen to strengthens that part of your mind. And so, for example, like I'm a pretty happy person, but as I started to do more and more shadow work, I realized that there were people inside of me that did have these like horrible, like saying like you're not good enough, you suck, and things like that. And I realized that they were there. I'm like, wow, my entire life, these people have been in there and saying those things, and I have that awareness now that they're there. And the way I've kind of countered that is by not repressing them and saying, shut up, that's not true. Like I realize that they're there and saying, hey, let's talk about this and how can we be on the same team to start healing together. And that's the way
yes.
I've been interacting with them. And then now we have the same goal of trying to become better, trying to heal. And with all my shadows, unfortunately, I have like almost like 27 shadows, unfortunately. So I have to get all of them on the same team, the healing, and it's a whole thing that's in my brain. But that's my system that I do. So for every voice, if you assign them a character and attributes, it makes it where that is a lot more tangible as a person. So that way it like a person is just a concept. So like your name is Ben, that's a concept. So if I
Mhm.
put you and I have your voice inside my head, now it's a concept that I can wrap my head around. And when every time that person talks, I can associate that with Ben, for example. And that's kind of the starting stages of shadow work. And once you start to realize that, you start to understand all these pieces of the mind. And when you're walking inside of a grocery store, you're like, I hate that person. And then you're like why did I like when you're like why did I just say that, like where did this come from? It's like this person was just walking by me and all of a sudden I said that I hate this person. You start to realize these random acts that start to come up, and it just teaches you a lot about yourself, to be honest.
Oh, it absolutely does. And I would even say, so when you're touching on shadow work, that's awesome. Um, and I often say the shadow work game is, I call it the why game. You just keep asking yourself why until you get to, we'll say, the root-ish enough of why you feel those certain things. So for me, I personally don't label all of the shadows, right? I kind of put them all under one umbrella as this entity of me that kind of branches out and has different things.
Yeah.
Because I feel like with that, like I try to simplify it as much as possible, because happiness, I feel like we've overcomplicated a lot, because we've made this game of making ourselves miserable since we were really young. Make it like, I mean, I don't know if you grew up as an athlete or if you played sports growing up or
Mhm.
anything like that. I was gonna say, you're from Texas. I'm sure you grew up playing some sort of sports.
Yeah.
So, but like we're taught, if it doesn't make you bleed, sweat, or hurt, you didn't do it right. And it's kind of like, that's not how we should be doing these things. Like we should follow those things that make us feel good. So like
Mhm.
when you're saying like the shot, like shadow work is so important, because what you're starting to realize is there's different versions of me that are inside of me. Like I don't know if you like get into like the inner child stuff,
Yeah.
but that was the thing that broke me like wide open. Was I had childhood stuff that I went through, right? I got bullied heavily as a kid when I went to Catholic school. And from there on, I turned into this chameleon of a person. I could walk into a room and just be liked, because I learned how to survive in a room full of people that I felt like wanted to either beat me up, verbally abuse me, or anything like that. So when you start, like you're talking about, sitting on that couch with that version of you, and mine was my inner child, and I was just like, I'm here. I'm not judging you. I'm not changing you. I'm not doing anything. Like, I'm just here.
Yeah.
I was like, it's almost like I'm getting chills talking about that. Like it was like that. Like it was almost like he just needed to be heard. And I'm sure,
Yeah.
like with you, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like the shadows were working so hard just to be seen, that
Yeah.
they were like acting out until they got your attention enough to be
Yes.
addressed, right?
Yes, I forgot what book it is, but I think it's called Embracing My Selves. But it's basically like a dog in the cage, where the dog just wants to get out. It like once it gets out, it screams, it yells, and then like 10 minutes later, it's like, well, thanks for letting me. Like it's like thanks for letting me talk. That was about it.
Yeah.
All I wanted. And then it like goes back to normal, like where it's like silence. And I wanted to touch on that because I have this vulnerable child inside of me, and like when I was growing up, I was not a very attractive kid. Like I was just like a normal kid, and a lot of girls did not like me. So like no big deal type of thing. But what my vulnerable child said was like, no matter what, I did not think a girl could ever love me. Like that was its constant thing. Like a girl can never love me. A girl can never love me. And when I would always chase the girls that rejected me, because that would give the vulnerable child some inner comfort for rejecting me. And I was like, why am I always chasing these girls that reject me? And then I realized that vulnerable child was only given comfort from getting rejected. So now I learned to start loving myself and telling myself that another girl can love me for who I am, and I don't need to progress anymore for someone to love me. And that was like super powerful for me, because I always felt like I had to get better, I had to get stronger, I had to become more wealthy in order for someone to love me. But I was like, wait a second. A girl can love me for who I am right now. And me communicating that with myself was super powerful, because that's why I worked so hard 14 hours a day, because I never thought anyone could love me unless I progressed and had the millionaire car and everything else. And unfortunately, there's a lot of guys out there. I made a video recently saying a girl can love you for who you are and not from the material possessions you have. And all these guys were like, Victor, you're an idiot. That's not true. And I was like, people really think that? Like most guys, a lot of guys mainly think that a girl will only love them based off their objects that they provide. And I was like, holy crap, guys really think of it like this. So I started creating more content on this, because like that's a horrible way to live, because you're only attracting the girls that only find those objects valuable, and they're not in love with you. They're in love with your objects. And it's just crazy.
Oh, it is. And I'd be willing to bet once you broke through the barrier and got that girl, you were on to the next one
Yeah.
because that's just the way it works, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
because that you've been taught, I gotta fight, I gotta fight, I gotta fight, then I get it. Well, I'm taught all I do is I fight, I fight. Like I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. Then finally you break through. You get the girl that you felt like what you weren't good enough for, and then you're like, oh, I really didn't want you. I just wanted that
Validation.
game. I wanted the game to get there. So I keep saying, like, man, congratulate yourself and pat yourself on the back. Those are huge lessons to learn, and as you work through those types of things, like you said, like the guys and the like that are surrounding themselves with women or whoever it may be, partners that are just looking for the objects, remember you're creating that reality based off your beliefs. So if somebody is saying, Victor, you're an idiot, blah blah blah, like that's their reality. They are
Yeah.
surrounding themselves with people that want them for their cars, their money, this and that, which if that makes them happy, totally cool. Like just because I don't like that, that's not for me, doesn't make them wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, because some people are like, I'm in it for the toys. I work hard. I work 18 hours. Like, I want toys. That makes me happy. Cool. Until it doesn't. And then you're going to find another thing that's going to work
Yeah.
hard for it. Like, and right now, like, that's the kind of thing. So I think, like you're spot on with, at least in my book, right? That you're looking for something much more of substance. And it goes back to the first thing you said. And the way I heard it was you had to find out that you could love yourself before anyone else could love you, because you were taught that you couldn't be loved by someone else. You weren't good
Yep.
enough. And once you like turn that around, you're like, wait a second, I can look in the mirror and see like I'm a good looking dude, or at least I don't have to judge myself, but I'm cool. I'm down to earth. I have good morals. I'm here to help people. Like I start naming good things about myself instead of, oh, I think my nose is too big, or I think, you know what I mean? Like stuff that I was made fun of all my life for. Like, like I'm like, I ended up getting my septum pierced because I was like, if I'm gonna have this Christmas tree on my face, I'm gonna put an ornament on it. Like I just took it out a couple months ago, but like, it was one of those things, like that was my embracement of like, you can't break me. Like I'm gonna have fun. I love who I am, and I can't change it.
Mhm. Yeah. And that's so true. And I just recently read the High Five Habit book. And basically, every time I would look in the mirror, like even a week ago, like up to a week ago until I started reading it, I would always look in the mirror and always see the thing that I needed to work on and the thing I didn't like about my body. And what the book talks about is start looking at the things that you like about your body and saying, okay, wow, I actually have pretty good shoulders. Okay, cool. I have pretty good biceps. Awesome. And like saying one thing you like about yourself, and you can't leave the mirror until you end up high fiving yourself. That's literally the high five habit. So, like, and I think that's like the definition of happiness. If you're able to look in the mirror and high five yourself and be proud of who you are and love yourself, I think you've beaten life. Like that's my definition. It's not like being a millionaire. There's a lot of miserable millionaires out there that hate who they are. Like no matter who you are, like I think the definition of my happiness is being able to look in the mirror and high five yourself. I think that's
Mhm.
like my version of success in my book.
And to be able to define that, puts you so far ahead of where you've used to be, right? Just being able to like, people don't take the time to define what happiness is for them. So they're just out there throwing hands full of rice at like the side of a barn, hoping that something sticks. And you're like, wait, I don't know what happiness looks like. So I don't know what I'm striving for. And I
Yeah.
love that high five method. Something I do, I took like shadow work to a whole different level is in my basement, I have like one of those sliding bench trainers and an elliptical.
Hmm.
So after I'm done doing my workout, like I'll cool down and I'll walk back and forth, and light comes in from one of the windows, and it casts my shadow onto the wall. The closer I get to it as I walk back and forth, and every time I get to there, I start envisioning myself as like the best. That's the best version of me. Like, you're a mental health coach that helps so many people achieve their happiness and help them help themselves. And I start talking to that shadow. It's like Peter Pan. I literally look at that and like I see this version of me, and I high five it. I turn around and like I slap it on the back end. I'm like, hell yeah, like we're doing this. And I will tell you what, man, after 1 week of that, I started looking at myself because there's no face, there's no eyes, it's just this outline of me. And
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm looking at it. And once you take away those things and you see your shadow, you're like, that's who I am. I'm not these teeth. I'm not these muscles. I'm not this nose with an ornament on it or whatever. Like, I'm what I see and what I'm telling myself I am. That's who I'm. It's just who I am because that's who I believe I am. And that was, to this day, I say the besides starting meditation, really, but like was one of the strongest practices I've ever implemented in my life, was that literal shadow work.
Hmm. Yeah, and I've taken it. My first when I first did shadow work, I did a lot of written stuff.
Mhm.
Starting out with that, my first shadow work, and literally when I first talked to my inner critic inside of myself, it was like 3 paragraphs long. You know how we talked about like yelling and screaming? It was like, why are you not working on this? You're not good enough. You're fat. Why are you not progressing right now? You could be working. And it was like, holy crap! Like, what is wrong with you? Type of like, it was like insane. And so eventually, I just started doing a lot of face to face with my video camera. So I kind of like just talk and you utilize different voice, like different voices type of thing, with the different shadows. And where I'll be like, hey, like right now, like I'm angry and I have no idea why. Like, let's talk about this. Like, why are
Ooh.
you angry? And then literally like something will come in and then we're like saying, hey, I'm angry because of this and this and this. I'm like, okay, why, like why are you angry? And then you can really dive into it even more. So that's the reasoning of why I separate my shadows into like different characters, is because I can call a specific one in and have them interact with each other sometimes, if that ends up
Ooh.
next, like, so I have like a nurturing mother inside of myself where I was lacking. Like, it was making it where a lot of the vulnerable voices never thought anyone could love them. So I built that like nurturing mother and strengthened that voice by listening to more content that would strengthen that. And now that she helps all the other vulnerable voices that I have inside myself. So that's the reasoning behind why I built the characters, so they can interact with each other and help start that healing process and help it go a little bit faster.
I love that because it does help because it makes it almost tangible,
Hmm.
because it's like you're not telling yourself a story, you're watching a play instead of
Yeah.
telling the story. Now, like, you can name the characters, you know how they feel, and then that's a really cool practice. I really like, and like I it might not work best for me, but I totally understand where you're coming from and how that benefits you, because
Hmm.
like I might even like in coaching and stuff like that talk to people about that, because some people struggle with shadow work because they're like,
Hmm.
well, there's so much happening. But what you're saying, which is really cool, is like label the things that just feel like too much, like the person who's yelling at you, the person who cries too, quote unquote, too much.
Yeah.
That's a really cool practice, man. I appreciate you sharing that. I like that. That opened me up. That opened my eyes to a really cool thing.
Yeah, and so I'm such a nerd that I actually do this to an extreme where I actually map out. You know how we said like not making it too complicated? Well, I do it because I'm really fascinated. It's more of a fascination rather than making it more complicated. But I map out like all their strengths, their weaknesses, and vulnerabilities and what their motivations are. And that teaches you a lot about yourself. So you know that these motivations are like, for example, the reason why I'm interested in breaking open the brain and having this podcast is because I have this, what I call the inner scientist. He's super curious about everything and wants to explore that like version of the mind and breaking open my mind. And I establish a lot of the credit to him for the progress that I'm making on all these aspects of the mind. And when that happens, I know what the curiosities come from, if that makes sense. So I might be, for example, I have also this manipulator inside my head. He's very
Mhm.
interested about manipulating people. So when I'm going to conferences and things like that, and if I have a goal, I will hear the manipulator. I'm like, oh, the manipulator's coming out. I was like, whatever, just do whatever you need and get the goal, and then like let's go to being a happy person afterward, type of thing. So
Okay.
like, and you're able to kind of construct these personas behind them, and which is really really fascinating. So like for example, if I'm at a conference, I might call the manipulator and the kind man, and I might integrate the two and saying, hey, this is the persona I need to build right now. I need to be very kind and very compassionate, and I also need to get my goal. And so that's the person I need to build right now. But then when I'm at a date, I might build another persona. So rather than your persona defining you and how you interact in that particular environment, you're actually able to construct your persona of what you want based off of your inner shadows that you have. It's really fascinating.
That is really fascinating. And where the only so the only from someone who studies the mind, especially extensively, the only thing would point out is understand that all of those are a collective you.
Yeah.
And it almost sounds kind of like trying to think of sometimes it takes away from the presence of a lot of things, right? It's almost taking like, oh, if the manipulator's stepping in and doing this, sometimes it's easy to take the accountability and throw it onto him and say
True.
he's doing this, right? So which I love what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
That would just be like if I was like in an imaginary world that we're working together, right? That's something I would say, love the practice. Just be conscious that like these 27 shadows aren't running 27 different shows. They're all
Yeah.
part of the same show. And you're the conductor, you're the director of this. It's
Yeah.
just kind of like learning how to get all of them on the same page with the same mission to work together. That would just be my only, anybody who's listened, that
Mm-hmm.
as a mental health coach, that would be my only worry. But I love the practice
Yeah.
because it's like it's literally what people do in therapy is you have to name the emotion to tame the emotion, and you're doing it and you're not just naming it, you are building characters around it, which is awesome.
And like, I think the requirement of before you get into shadow work is you have to be accountable for yourself. And the second thing is you have to have some level of people skills, to like how to motivate people and acquire them. And then what I've learned recently is have some level of alphaness or confidence or strength. So the reason why I say that, every other voice in myself, the vulnerable voices, they're very easy to work with. You basically give them comfort and they're basically happy. Like that was all the voices I basically interacted with. But you know how I said most girls didn't like me when I was a kid? I have this, what I call the rebel inside of me, where she was like, ew, I don't want to be a part of your team. Like, you're a loser. I would never be a part of you. You suck. And that was literally how she interacted. It was like very, very hard, as I'm a very alpha person, and she was a very alpha person. So it was very, very like hard to
Mm.
interact with that inner shadow. And it like kind of shook me at my core a little bit. I was like, whoa, that was hurt. That really was painful. But then I eventually like tackled those insecurities, saying, hey, you have the same insecurities I do. We're both afraid of how other people look at us. Like, we need to work on that insecurity. And then she goes, okay, fine. And then we eventually teamed up, and now we're like on the same team and we're working together through those things. So that was like an inner dialogue that I had to have. But I usually say,
Mm.
like, you got to have that accountability. You got to have those, some level of people skills to interact with those people, and then
Absolutely.
some level of confidence before you start it, because some of these voices are going to shake you to your core, and you're like, like, I'm a very confident person, but that like stripped me down. I was like, holy crap, that was painful.
No, and you're right, because you're managing personalities at that point, right? Like it's like walking into a conference and taking questions from an audience, and you're like, okay, you have to be ready to be able to like one wear it, and then also know how to filter, listen, and provide feedback and direct it like this. What we're talking about, you're the director of that show. You have an overall idea of where you want the show to go. You want it to be, you want happiness, you want to be present, you want to be confident, you want to be successful, like those, whatever those things you, and like once you get that information, then it's like, okay, how do I filter it? Not saying it's the manipulator, but it's the person's like, remember, I'm the director, all of
Yeah.
you are part of the show, I'm that director. So that is, and you're right, you have to have a sense of strength, because I always tell people like healing is really hard, and you're going to get to this point where you're going to be like, it's not working. No, it's working. it's just hard and you want to give up right now. Like you're like, oh no, like, because people often say, well, when will I be healed? And when I have to say, you never will be healed, this is a forever thing. Like there's no like this like finish line where you're gonna cross and be like, hey,
I'm
I did it. I
happy.
did it. And then
Yeah.
the next day something's gonna happen. You're like, wow, I didn't make the finish line. Then you're gonna feel sad again. It's like once you understand you're never gonna be perfect because there's no such thing as it. You're never gonna be fully healed. But what you're gonna do is find ways to continue to build and work through things that are gonna forever be coming at you. You're becoming like a well-trained warrior, and
Yeah.
like with, and you're just leveling up and fighting new bosses every time
Yeah.
something happens, essentially.
And I love that. And what's so important to realize is our mind is adapted to, like, think about it, through like evolution. It doesn't matter what you believe. We came from the most paranoid and anxious people that were out there. The people that were most controlled by fear. That is our descendants of our ancestors of where we came from.
Yep.
And we are not designed to be happy. Like the people, the humans that were more ambitious and always said, I gotta have more, I gotta have more, I gotta be more successful. Those are the ones that flourished and end up being successful. And it's the reason why we are here today in such a successful society, which is good. But it makes it where we will never be happy. So it's important to realize that we are designed to never be happy. Don't use that as an excuse, but then now you can come into the realization, okay, this is how I'm supposed to be. Okay, now how can I work to counter that ability to actually be happy? Because we're not designed to be content. It's something that we have to work toward, an everlasting thing, because our mind is designed to always be greedy, to always want more, and to always feel like we're never enough. And unfortunately, that's just the way it is right now.
Oh, we were designed to survive. That was our only goal. So there's oftentimes this misconception that we're separate from nature, right? We're different from animals. Like we're
Yeah.
not. We all come from the same place. We may have different brains, different bodies, and set, but like our one purpose in life is to survive.
Yeah.
So that's where like I have to explain anxiety to a lot of people and panic attacks. Um, we come from descendants and evolved from trying to survive the Serengeti, where we were, bless you, we are constantly trying to outsmart a lion trying to come and get us. We can't outrun it, so we have to outsmart it. We can't sleep a full night's sleep because that's where jaguars are hanging out, and we have to make sure that we're on the like the move. So now we're sitting at desks in a house with air conditioning, and our body is still trying to survive, but our mind is operating on a completely different dimension than that. So that's where people like I had a it was my a big part of my journey with panic disorder is I had to learn what that was. So you're filling up your body with stress all of the time, whether we know it or not. What you may feel is healthy and comforting may be filling up this giant bucket of stress, and at one point it's gonna overflow, because and when that happens, the body goes into survival mode, raising the levels of cortisol, providing an adrenaline rush, and it's telling you survive. And your mind's like, I'm in an air conditioned house working on a presentation for 2:30. What am I doing? And
Yeah.
so that disconnect is like, our body's meant to survive and our mind hasn't adapted to that. Or
Yeah.
our body hasn't adapted, I should say. So like you're like, that's where we come from, is like we're not built for comfort, we're built to survive.
Yeah. And it's important to understand those voices that the brain is kind of programmed to design around them. Like, that's what kind of shadow work is there to do, is to see what is the default programming of constantly being greedy, and understanding that piece, and realizing that you don't need to identify with it. And that's where you have to like separate yourself from those things. And especially in America, where everything's keeping up with the Joneses, we always got to have that better thing, and that's the culture we live in, and like super grind hard type of thing. But we're all just running away from our insecurities at the end of the day. Like, and if until we start to not identify with our thoughts and realizing that, hey, these negative thoughts were not given by me, and start to tackle those head on, that's really the only way you can be happy, is by like asking why. It really is.
It is asking why, and I really like the question that just came in.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was a killer. It's a killer question. And if you don't mind, I'd
Go
love to
ahead. You
answer it.
got it. It's all yours.
So, do you believe that thoughts are material, especially when you yourself build the path to them. I feel that we spend so much time trying to be our thoughts that we think these materials are ours, and nothing is ours. Our thoughts are not even ours. You know what I mean? Like that. So that's something. It ties back perfectly to what you were just saying. We're the observer of thoughts. Like we are not the thoughts. We are simply like, if you want to break it down, we are just awareness. So like certain thoughts bring us certain things, which can manifest themselves into material, money, success, whatever it may be. So I think like when you say you build the path to them, that's really cool to like. I like the way you worded that, because the thoughts you have are not your thoughts. So the
Yeah.
things you have are not your things. So like and like that gets very like Zen and very Buddhism type stuff, but like that really helps me, especially when I'm in the search for happiness, in the search
Yeah.
for getting through anxiety. It's understanding like these are all temporary, including the thoughts, including the things. So that's where like it comes like my meditation practices, my mindfulness practices, my breath work. It's like understanding that like all of this stuff that I surround myself with, they were originally thoughts that got me here,
Yeah.
but those things are not mine. Just
Yeah.
like those thoughts aren't mine.
Yeah. And I always talk about like what I realized recently is our subconscious does 95% of the work and 5% is just the consciousness part. And I was wondering, like, what does consciousness even do? And it really is just the feeling of awareness, because the subconscious can't figure out what is real, what's happening in reality, and what's happening inside of our mind. It can't tell the difference. And that's all consciousness is for, is to figure out what's real and what's happening in our mind. That is all it's for. So any thoughts you have, that is not your thoughts. You're just the observer of those thoughts. So you don't have to identify with them, but realize that the subconscious is doing all the work. Don't use it as an excuse for things, but understand that these are the things that are running. And now you can be the programmer of your thoughts rather than your subconscious deciding everything that you do in your life. That's the hope when it comes down to really designing your mind in order to be happy.
I It's exactly how I feel as well.
Yeah.
I was super intrigued by the subconscious mind because my conscious mind wasn't exactly a party I wanted to attend. It was getting a little bit more difficult the older I was getting. So the more I dove into that, it was like I just read a book. It's called The Power of Your Subconscious Mind,
Oh,
and
really? That's
I'm
so
trying
funny.
I'm trying to bring it up as I'm where is it? My library. The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy.
Yep.
And that's exactly that's just what it talks about is so as we're sleeping, the subconscious mind is running the show. Like our body doesn't shut off. Like we're still operating. Our conscious mind is it's gone.
Yeah.
But so like that's what they often say is like like right as you're falling asleep. I have my affirmations and my beliefs that I'll like tell myself. But like find the good that happened in the day. And like so it'll be like I'm really grateful that my fiance and me got to spend some time together and go for a walk after work. I'm really grateful I got to talk to my mom on the phone. I'm really grateful. And the subconscious mind loves that because the subconscious mind creates your reality and your conscious mind observes your reality. So once you start playing with that subconscious mind, you're going to start realizing that the power of perspective is literally the breath of life.
Yes. And also, once you realize that you are not your conscious thoughts and your subconscious is doing the most of it, that doesn't mean it's out of your control. What that means is that you can start giving it more information to strengthen what particular voices you want to strengthen. So if you want to be a more positive person, you can listen to more content and strengthen those parts of your subconscious mind, and you can play around with it, and you can like you're still deciding. You're like you said, you are the director of your thoughts. You can still control those things, and realizing that you can control that with the content that you watch and the people that you're around. And it's actually pretty easy. It's like it's not like this hard thing. Yes, this healing process isn't easy, but if you just want to get more positive thoughts, it starts with the information that you consume, and the people that you're around will determine how you think and your subconscious mind is. You just have to make the conscious decision to take to actually make that happen, and then you will actually see the results from it. But until you make that conscious decision, it won't happen.
That so when you asked me what I would think that the title of the podcast would be, it's that's why I said happiness starts with a single thought. And it is that exact thought. It's that conscious decision to be happy. And that's not going to mean that you're happy every minute of every single day of every year of your life. It means that I choose happiness. So when things are not moving, when you get news that you really wish you didn't get, you stop, you sit with it on the couch, you sit with those shadows or whoever's coming out, right? You sit with it on the couch and you say, what am I learning from this? Because my ultimate objective is to be happy. So I feel happy when I learn lessons. So
Mhm.
when I can step back, remove myself from the emotional roller coaster, but also remember, like, provide time to feel the emotions. Like we said, we're not
Yeah.
trying to cut these things off. It's understand that I'm going to give myself time to whether it be grieve, to celebrate, to do whatever it might be along this emotional roller coaster. But ultimately, I'm choosing happiness. And once you sit, you become whether it be a mental health coach, when you or whether you're a speaker, whether whatever, like you're learning to
Hmm.
do this by reverse engineering it. If my goal is happiness, I'm gonna sit there, I'm gonna look at it and be like, I know what the end goal is. I'm just gonna work backwards.
Yeah,
That's that.
that's so true. And like a lot, there's just so many pieces of it, like when it comes down to understanding that like subconscious and conscious area. Is there anything else that's been top of mind for you lately that you wanted to talk about?
Top of mind. It's been so we talked about subconscious mind. That's really been something I've been like, it's kind of been like my like, I don't want to even call it project, but that's where I've been finding that like childlike wonder recently. Like when you go outside and you look at the trees, like at one point in our lives we didn't know what trees were, and they were like big furry green things growing out of the ground. And like,
Yeah.
so that's something I've been looking to find a little bit more, is the childlike wonder, where like you look up and you're like, instead of looking at the clouds and being like, that's a cumulus cloud, or that's this, like it used to be a donkey riding a balloon. And like, like, so it's like, I would say something that's been top of my mind is finding childlike wonder and working on expectations of being present. Um,
Yeah.
so being present is a big goal of mine. But sometimes being present doesn't always feel good. Like the people think like I love to study like Zen Buddhism. I'm a big fan of Alan Watts. And like it's one of those things, like you talk about, like being present isn't always happiness.
Yeah.
Being present is, I'm unhappy right now or I'm in pain right now. That is being present. So I'm just, the only thing I'm going to do, and it's meditation, is the only place I'm going to be is right here. I'm not wishing for something to be different. I'm not trying to change my circumstances. I'm just being here. And once you're in that moment and once you're truly present, that's when like I feel like all of these lines kind of start to connect and you start to really be like, you see the matrix of life a little bit.
Yes. And in the other Untethered Soul, they talk about how you're able to almost like wake up from a dream. And it's so true. Like if you ask yourself, are you conscious right now? And when you ask yourself that question, all of a sudden you kind of wake up from the dream. You're like, whoa, I am. Like I'm a person, like I'm seeing right now. And you kind of like woke up from this dream. Because we spend 99% of our life in our thoughts and this reality that we build in ourselves. But when you ask, are you alive right now? You're like, whoa, like I am alive. Like I'm looking around, I'm a human, I'm touching things, I can feel, I can smell, but we spend 99% of our life not being present and not being alive even though we're set to be alive. So, it's almost good to have this practice where every time at a stoplight, I have this cue to where it's saying, like, I ask myself, am I alive? And I'm like, whoa, like you'll just see me at a stoplight and I'll all of a sudden like jump. I'll be like, oh my goodness, like I'm alive right now. This is crazy. And I kind of wake up from that dream because we're always in this dream state of always in our thoughts. And you can kind of wake up from that by asking yourself, are you alive? And it's crazy.
It is crazy. And I even take it a step further and I'd ask you, what is being alive to you?
I would say like the really feeling of consciousness. Like this feeling like for me is I know that we're only made up of five chemicals, and out of those five chemicals, we're nothing but this long chemical equation in a bag of chemicals, nothing different from the dirt in the ground. And yet we have this feeling of life. We don't deserve to have this feeling. We should be robots that be able to go through life, but yet we feel alive. And even though we're just these five chemicals, and it's just really amazing. The fact that if I just I'm grateful for having the chance of having life. Like if I was born and died 3 seconds later, like I am grateful for that, the ability, the chance to have that capability. The fact that I'm alive right now and able to feel, even though I'm just these bag of five chemicals, like it's insane. Like we should not be able to feel alive. Like, and I'm so grateful for that.
It is, and it's super cool. And like I feel like we've been on a similar journey because like you're like I very much line up with a lot of what you say, a lot of what you read, a lot of what you're talking about has definitely like been part of major part of my journey as well. And that's where like I feel like, you know, there's a certain aspect of like when people like ask you like who are you, and you're like, I'm Ben Meyers, I'm a mental health coach, I live in Pennsylvania, I do this. You say, no, but who are you? Oh, well, when I was a kid I did this. It's like, who are you? And then you sit there and you be like, I'm just a conscious being made up of those five chemicals with
Yeah.
nitrogen, hydrogen, oxygen. Up, I can't on the spot. I'm not going to name them. But then, like, I sit there and I'm like, I come to this thing where like I am just love. That's just what I am. To my being, like it's a giant charade, whatever you want to call it. Like I'm just love, and it's as beautiful. And like it doesn't always feel that way, but
Yeah.
in the law of duality of having to be one side or the other, and just kind of like without the grief, without the hard times, without the obstacles, the happiness, the love, the compassion, the empathy, the kindness, like doesn't exist because I don't know what that is without the other side. So it's kind of like sometimes when I just meditate, I like to say like, just be. That's it. And like my mind tries to figure that out. It's like, well, beware, just be. And then like the more you feel that way, like you're like, then you just start saying things like, this is me, this is just me being goofy. But I'm like, I am what? I am. And like, and then you start sitting there like, holy shit, I am deep. Like, you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
it's crazy, man. That's like that can get a little woo for some people, and I can understand it. I kind of think like as a mental health coach, that's what I work on, is translating woo into tangible and actionable things,
Yeah.
and explaining it to people because everyone has different beliefs, different
Yeah.
like whether you're religious, you're spiritual, atheist, it doesn't matter. However you get to these core things is your journey, and it's beautiful. We celebrate it. The judgment of others is where you're going to start tripping up on your own journey because
Yeah.
you're going to compare yourself.
And it's really hard to communicate that like spiritual journey, because especially when you start talking about shadow work and different like voices in your head that just think, wow, Victor, you're a psychopath, cool, type of thing. And like once they start to open up their mind a little bit, then they're able to understand those pieces. So to what you're saying, yes, it's very difficult as a communicator to articulate your thoughts enough and dial yourself down to the way they're thinking and apply it and make it where they can understand it, so that way your particular thoughts make sense to them and not make it sound like it's woo type of thing. It can be very, very difficult as a communicator to make that happen, but it's what I've been working toward. Like I'm very similar to you when it comes down to like saying, hey, like I try to make it very actionable. And rather than saying be positive, it's like, cool, Victor, but like how do I actually do that? And I try to make it very actionable for the audience.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is like if you ever have the like I am fortunate enough to have like a corner of supporters that like practice like mediumship and all that kind of stuff. And I think of like my mental health coaching as like I'm like I'm not the one helping you, you're the one helping you, but like I'm just kind of like this, I don't want to call it a channel because that does get woo. Like what like I do feel when I coach people, it's not my words coming out of my mouth. It's I'm saying things that are being brought to me from somewhere. I don't have whatever people want to believe. It's from somewhere, and the gift that I feel I have is I'm able to receive it and then articulate it in a way that is best received by that other person. And I think that's kind of where like the gift comes in of being a communicator, being a whatever. Like I do feel very in tune with something, very in tune with whatever it may be. A force much more intelligent than I knows what it is. And
Yeah.
then I just am able to receive. And then like when I know my core purpose is to help people, and that's where it comes from, and I set the intention to help people, like if two different people had the exact same problem, I would not give them the exact same answer. And I
Yeah.
think that's beautiful, you know?
It really is. And I'm going to stop us there because I know we can go on for this for 7 more hours. Ben, please tell them how to find you and how to get more information about your business.
Absolutely. If you are looking to follow me on any socials, I just started a new Instagram. Actually, it's at somebody like you underscore mental health. And then if you want to check out my website, it's www.somebodylikeyou.org. You can send me a DM, you can send me an email. Email is somebody like you 444 at gmail.com. Like I said, I do mental health coaching, I do group coaching. I help schools. I'm looking to get into speaking. I might talk to you on the side. Like I'm looking to get into like helping people on a larger scale, like to be in front of people, to getting people like a keynote or something like that. But yeah, reach out. I would love to be able to help you, someone you love, someone you care about, or a school or anything like that. That is where my passion lies.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ben. And thank you for all the people that commented. We usually don't get a lot of comments. So thank you, everyone, Ron and Michael. Thank you, everyone, for commenting. And this is the Mind Workshop podcast. Thank you guys later.